Happy New Year, everyone. I'm gonna kick this off from a question that's a carryover from late December, and I apologize to the person that asked this that I wasn't able to get to this until just now. But the question came up regarding um, some windows and creating divided lights that are sort of more customized. With certain windows, it's really simple just to come in here and say I've got an HV grid custom setup, and you could say I've got 5 wide and whatever 2 tall, and you get these custom pink hotspots. You can sort of move these, stretch them, push them, pull them, adjust the grids to however you want them to show. And that's really neat for that sort of grid setup. For some windows, however, the HV custom grids are not available. So for this Pentagon window in particular was the one that was asked about. There is either no grids or just the standard grid. So if you had a specific, like you wanted one lined up at the shoulder, it may or may not line up there. Let's put this back to 2 and put this at 1. Right, so it's all dependent on the geometry of the window. There's no way to specifically say that that grid is there or that the vertical grid is 18 inches off of the left and right jambs. In order to create a custom window like that, it is going to have to either be separate components placed into this window as a custom sash, or even easier than that, in my opinion, is to just model the whole window. There are a couple of things that you need to know about this, but here just as an example, I threw together a really quick window to represent this. If we look at this in 3D, I'll go ahead and grab this slab as well because that is important for this. You want to model it basically including the entire frame, the sash, everything that you need to include in the window. You could even add trim elements to this. Just note that there's very limited ability to resize this without some major distortion. So if the frame needs to be this thick in the wall, model it that thick. If it needs to be thicker, or if it's going to be installed with jamb extensions, whatever the window design actually is. The cool thing about this is that you can be very specific and actually model the window to the exact parameters that you want. Like I said, even including things like extra trim, extra detail in the moldings, all of that stuff. Interior and exterior surfaces can be different. You have all the controls that you may not have over some of the stock parts. When I model these things, I generally use slabs, and I keep the slabs on a hidden layer so that if I ever have to go back and rebuild it, I'm not starting from scratch. So that's just another little tip. Now I'm going to show you one thing here. If I grab this stuff, it's all just slabs modeled with the glass and the mullions and the sash and the frame. I'm going to go to File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, Window. And it's going to list off all of the attributes that I'm using here. So it is important that these attributes are sort of well defined to begin with. You can change the details, set a preview picture, all of that stuff. But if I come in here, I say OK and grab my window tool, and it's going to automatically default to that window that I created here. But what we'll see if I place this window, and let's look at this in 3D now, you notice that that window is actually cutting a square hole in the wall. We can actually fix that, and this is kind of a neat trick for any custom window or custom skylight that you want to build. The trick to that is to model a slab that is the exact shape that you want to punch the hole in the wall, and you call this wall hole in the element ID. That will, the script writer essentially in ArchiCAD will recognize that element ID, and it'll punch a hole that shape in the wall. It's very important not to name any of the other slabs that, or they won't show up, because this whole slab is only going to be scripted as the wall hole because I've given it that ID of wall hole. I'm going to then drag it over here, line it up with my outer sash. This is where if you had a frame or trim or something like that that you wanted to overlap, you could even put something like that, like wrap the trim, but the wall hole is only going to be here. So you want to make sure that this is actually proud of the wall if that was something that you were adding to the model. From here, actually just to show you the full thing, let's go ahead and pull a screenshot off of this. And we'll grab all of that. We'll go to File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, Window. I'm going to call this, you could save it over the top of the original, but I'm going to call this Pentagon Window 1. I'm going to say Save. I'm going to go into my details here, and I'm going to set up a preview image. This is going to be the thumbnail that shows up in ArchiCAD right there. I'll put my initials here so people know whose fault it is if this window's messed up. I can change all of the, or set keywords so that it's searchable. I can give a description. Usually that's something like the date that it was created, so you sort of know, or the version of ArchiCAD, things that will tell you important information if you need to change it down the road. And then we say OK, and select the window tool again, and it's going to be that pentagon window here. And if we look at that in 3D, you see that it's actually punching the correct shape and size of that. Now I did mention that resizing this can be fussy. You know, if we like change the width to say something like 16 feet, you'll notice that these sashes, which were the same as the vertical, are now distorted. The frame and everything gets distorted. So you kind of need a separate window for every window size if this is the solution that you're going to use for this. You do have settings in that window for building materials. I believe if you used surface overrides, you might have that as well. But there's just not the same depth of parameters that you would get out of an out-of-the-box door window. It does give you the flexibility to come in here and change it. The other cool thing about this, if you do retain these pieces and parts, let's say for example that I didn't want this mullion to run all the way up, you can modify the original stuff, the original components here, select it all again, go back to File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, Window, save it over the top of that pentagon window, and replace. You'd still want to add the preview image so you're not losing that, or create a new preview image so it doesn't have that vertical piece, and then say OK. And now every placed instance of that window should be updated without that mullion. So it is possible and even easy to modify that window after it's been placed. But again, you will want a separate window for sort of every configuration and size that you're going to need in a project.